Regular viewers looking at the length of this video are probably just nodding their heads and accepting the fact it's going to be long. But for newcomers and you old timers, things are a little different in this video. This recap section runs about 28 minutes and covers more than one episode. A full episode and most of the next. We haven't quite finished playing that episode yet, but I wanted to talk about it. The second half of this video, after the 28-minute mark, is a reflections on specific mechanical things, which I thought were worthy of commentary. So, it's not quite what you've come to expect.
At the behest of the people I'm fortunate enough to play with, if no one else, it's time for another Star Trek Adventures Modiphius 2D20 system recap. What have we been doing lately? Well, we're actually quite behind. There's an entire episode that you know nothing about, oh listeners. And we're most of the way through one after that. So, I know regular viewers and listeners of the channel are thinking, oh my god, this recap is going to be like 7 hours long. Well, I'm trying this format to see if I can make it shorter, because it's just a recap. All right. The session you know nothing about involved bringing the looming threat into clearer focus. The crew of the USS Crow had been working on rescue operations with their new allies in our version of the Beta Quadrant. And that allowed them to make a very strong and positive first impression for the Federation. And as we mentioned in the previous recap, it also allowed them to reveal the existence of the Romulan Star Empire and some of their tactics. Well, this news wasn't met with much excitement or enthusiasm, as you can imagine. Well, eventually the Crow had to resume its own mission, seeking out new cultures and looking for signs of the Romulans. But now they were doing so with the benefit of star charts and political information from their new allies, this Bediverian Council. So now their progress is, well, more in their control. Rather than, set a course for the second star on the right, they actually have places to go, and they have some information about where it is they're going before they get there. Now, the captain of the ship, whose rank is commander, she is a scientist and explorer at heart. So the opportunity to investigate strange new worlds is far more compelling to her than seeking out a Romulan threat. Or so it seems. So, this episode started out with the crew of the Crow investigating a star system which, for the most part, matched both requirements, both mission priorities for the vessel. It was uninhabited and likely to contain mineral resources of interest to the Romulan Star Empire. It was close to shipping lanes and inhabited areas and might make a good base of operations, having planet types which could suit, secretive operations. It featured archaeological sites which, as far as the locals were concerned, had been, sufficiently examined. But to her eye, not examined well enough. So, this was the destination of the Crow. But on the way there was once again mysterious contact with what could be a cloaked vessel, and relying on Bishop's assessments from the session before that, the crew was on edge and on alert. And so as they enter into this system, they come out expecting to find Romulans. They do a full survey of the system, and then they settle on one particular planet they want to study in detail, after convincing themselves that, well, maybe the Romulans aren't here. And that was a very fun part of the system. This entire episode, actually, I got to play with player perception versus character perception via threat. And based on player reactions, it seems like this was an enjoyable way to go about it. To be able to use the conceit that we are creating a television show. So being able to flip to the reaction of our typical North American family watching the TV together on the sofa, and deploy threat as the game master, or spend threat as the game master, and say, or describe something that the audience sees that the characters don't. So that three-layer approach to description was able to really finely tune, I feel, the tension or the humor that was occurring in each scene. So the audience knows, and therefore the players know, that there is a censor blip, there is something following them. But the characters successfully convince themselves, due to the skill of the crew of the Romulan vessel, that there's no threat. And so away teams are sent down to the planet's surface, and scientific investigation begins. Now, our crew are still very, very well trained, so they're still on alert. The XO has the Marine contingent aboard, preparing the fighter craft for rapid deployment. He has the he has the phaser crews and photon torpedo crews ready, and so on and so forth. The ship is ready to go to alert at a moment's notice. He has also prepared a stockpile of innovative devices that should aid them in revealing the position of a cloaked ship. However, there is still fear of an attack from ambush. Time passes. And time was the other element of this episode. Because when I began the first of what turned out to be 3 episodes, when I began that episode, I started with combat. I described a scene of phaser fire being exchanged with a target. I described the bridge having a Romulan officer on the view screen issuing an ultimatum to surrender. And then I suddenly cut to 24 hours earlier. So they knew they were headed in this direction. There's something out there. And they're paying attention very carefully to the time, right? How long does it take to investigate the system? How long does it take to deploy the landing crews? And so on and so forth. I wanted to empower the players to have the sort of paranoia and creeping through enemy territory feeling. And running the episode this way seemed to pay off. So finally, we get down to the 0 hour, and I have recreated a favorite technology of the Romulans from the original series and brought it forward into the next generation. We don't know much about the Romulans, so I'm not going to reveal the whys and wherefores of this situation in this recap. But suddenly, through the forward sensors and the forward view screen, they see this massive ball of plasma streaking toward the surface of the planet. Because of the amazing preparations and level of strategy evidenced by the XO and put into place by the ops officer and the chief of security, before the plasma hits the away teams are whisked away from the surface. They had limited the number of away teams. They had to the number of transporter rooms. They had limited the number of away team members to the number of transporter pads. They had sent a security officer with each team who was in constant communication with the ship, and they had kept the zone of investigation within manageable limits for sensors. So as soon as they detect the attack, the transporter crews are on standby and lift the crews off the planet. The plasma weapon hits with the devastation that it's known for. If you're unfamiliar with that weapon, check out the excellent original series episode Balance of Terror. So now they know it's out there. And for a moment, they knew where it was, and they're scrambling to be able to relocate it. There's some maneuvering, there's some desperate moments, and then they are attacked from behind at short range. The Chief of Security, acting quickly, is able to fire on the plasma weapon, which disrupts its envelope that holds the plasma in place as it's being generated, and minimizes the damage that the Crow takes. The fighters are launched. Once again, they have a sense of where it is, and they begin to make it harder and harder and harder for this vessel to operate under cloak. And they're gathering data all the time. They're trying to figure out which class of Romulan ship it might be, new or older, and so on and so forth. They're piecing together vital information as the seconds of combat tick by. They go into evasive maneuvering, and they're looking for their chance. Once again, the Romulan vessel fires. This time, with the fighters scrambled, they're easily able to dissipate the weapon before it proves to be a threat. The Romulans, revealed and realizing they are very much outgunned, disappear. So how did that time-twisting trick I did of 24 hours before work out? Well, it just so happened that everything played out just as you'd imagine. The bridge officers were called to the bridge. They see the Romulan commander issuing his ultimatum, and they, give the order to fire. Everything was just seamless and nice. And it was very rewarding to have the players get involved to that level to make sure that the episode played out like an episode of TV would. And that really was the end of that episode, except the final scene as the Romulan commander is realizing that things are not going in his favor. The commander, the captain, has been brought back up from the surface. Much of the tension in this episode also coming from her insistence that she's going to be on an away team. This is her interest area, and that the XO can do whatever he wants to ensure her safety on the surface, but down she's going. She marches onto the bridge and stands back to let the XO handle this combat. She has been testing him throughout the series. This is one more test. She doesn't take command from him when she enters the bridge. She simply assists in the background. And as we reach this point of standoff, she speaks to the Romulan commander in Romulan. Jaws drop all around the bridge. The Romulan commander flees, and she finishes the episode with, "I'll be in my ready room," and marches off the bridge of the Crow. So this raised a lot of interesting questions, hopefully, and ones which will have spin-off effects later on in our campaign. Now, the next episode is still in progress, and it is a shore leave episode. We opened up with the Crow dropping off one of the shuttles, the Sir Francis Drake, and warping out of orbit, wishing the crew a nice week of vacation. And we see in the shuttle Tapora, our Chief of Security, we see Bishop, our Ops Manager, and we see our XO, Marcus Duvall. all heading down for a much-needed tropical vacation. The planet is described as one that had very few natural predators, and, well, their cultural advice was to stay out of the affairs of locals. The specific wording was, don't interfere with them, just stay within the resorts and enjoy your time. The planet is beautiful, etc., etc. And so that's what they set out to do. And they're still mulling over mysteries raised in the previous episode. One of the ties that we had brought to the surface was the Next Generation episode where the Federation and the Klingons and the Romulans and others were tracking down a genetic code in their own DNA and using it as a star map to find the birthplace of all the humanoid species in the galaxy. That is one of the motivators, it seems, for the Romulans to be beginning their aggressive expansion. They are claiming they are the superior race among all the humanoid races, and therefore everything belongs to them. So this is an interesting thing to mull over. So this is yet another world where a humanoid species evolved, and yet this one seems to be like a paradise. The way that this world receives visitors is through tech transfers, and it's one that has been uplifted out of a primitive condition by the Bediverian Council, which makes our Federation crew a little uncomfortable because they, for the most part, strongly believe in the Prime Directive. But here they are. This culture has already been, quote, contaminated, end quote, and so there's nothing to be done. They make their tech transfers, trying to make the lives of the locals better, and have access to the resorts. Everything seems fine. And we meet some new people from some of the races and species that we've already encountered in the series or in the campaign so far. We find Aquans and we find stiff Bediverians and so on and so forth. The locals seem almost completely human. But they can observe, as they were advised by the Bediverian Council, that there is distance between visitors and locals. So, whatever, they're just here to relax. Marcus Duvall wants to go swimming, and so on and so forth. Now, they have a security officer with them, who is also ostensibly on leave, but he is supposed to be their liaison with the local security forces or police forces, and is there to protect them. They are bridge officers. Well, I selected for this the head of the Marine squad or platoon on the ship, someone with whom there has been political friction. The crew is basically uncomfortable with the Marines because the Marines are soldiers, and the Crow has been repurposed as a ship of war, let's say, from an exploration vessel. And while most of the crew aboard the Crow is handpicked for this mission, the attitude of the captain does have an effect on the outlook of the crew. So, the person who's supposed to be watching over their backs, the person that they're now going on vacation with, is a person that they don't see eye to eye with. The creation of this character was done for specifically that reason, so we could explore these ideas. Now, this particular character is a secondary character. It's one that the players could inhabit at any time. And that's important for this episode. So we've played 2 sessions of this episode. There's perhaps one more to go, but I'm not really sure. The timing of this one is maybe impossible to predict, because it's a legal case. See, within a short period of time of their arrival on the planet, this Marine lieutenant, Carson Rogers, has gotten himself arrested. And it's not clear at first why he was arrested, but it was made clear pretty early on that the penalty was death. So we have investigative scenes trying to track down where did he go to. They discover that he's been arrested. They try and figure out what did he do. No one's able to tell them at this point because he's just been accused, and evidence is still being collected. Marcus Duvall, our XO, is Betazoid, who has full telepathy. And so after a brief discussion and struggle with the morality of it, begins liberally reading minds and trying to piece together what the witnesses think they've been brought in for, and so on and so forth. And it takes him quite a while to piece together a sense that he has no idea what it is that Carson Rogers could possibly have done. Because it seems like all he did was carry a heavy package for an old woman. Well, once local lawyers are brought in for them to select, they have the choice of an Aquan lawyer, so kind of I described him in a way to evoke a connection to the type of lawyer we see Tom Cruise play in A Few Good Men, if you've seen that movie. Someone who's interested in settling out of court, someone who's interested in the monetary rewards, someone who doesn't particularly have any moral attachment to the outcomes. He's interested in winning the court case for his own glory and reveling in not having to go to court, that kind of thing. We have a Bediverian lawyer who lets them know that the influence of the Bediverian Council has enabled an addendum to be made to the local legal code, which is trial by combat being acceptable. This is pretty horrifying at first, but as the investigation into the crime continues and they recognize the unfairness of it, the strangeness of it, and perhaps the inability to gain a good verdict for Carson Rogers, they find themselves debating again and again whether or not they should recommend trial by combat, as they're very confident that the young, fit, hard-charging Marine lieutenant will be totally able to dominate in that arena. But it bothers them, as it should. The first session was arrival, and concluded with the arrest of Carson Rogers. The second was debate. Debate about the issues raised by the episode. The nature of the crime. The role of the Federation. What they should or shouldn't do. What the beneficial thing for Carson Rogers would be to do. And the second session ended with the XO and the Chief of Security and the Ops Manager recommending to Carson Rogers that he go for the Bediverian attorney and trial by combat, as otherwise they're convinced they will not be able to free him. Now, through the course of this episode, we have seen Carson Rogers transform from their stereotypical view of him into a truer view of him, as well as the recognition that they had fallen prey to that stereotype, the stereotype of the difference between the standard Federation crew and the Starfleet Marine. Instead, they suddenly see him not as someone who's interested in taking the fight to the enemy, but someone who's interested in standing between the enemy and the citizen. And this changes everything. And so that session ended with Carson Rogers informing them that he would do what he was ordered to do, but if given the freedom of choice, he would choose the local lawyer. The local lawyer we need to talk about now. Unlike the Bediverian, who said trial by combat so that we can free you from this unfair legal system, unlike the Aquan lawyer who said, I'm pretty sure if we throw enough resources at them, we can settle out of court, the local lawyer said, I don't think that I'll be able to free your crewman, but I can guarantee that I can make this trial so public that the entire world will have to really examine the issue, and while I'm certain he will still be given the death penalty, the benefit in the long run to my people will be immeasurable. That sounded very noble, but it didn't sound like the sort of thing you'd recommend to your friend and fellow crewman, although Carson Rogers doesn't really qualify as a friend. But he is someone that suddenly they have a desire to protect above and beyond the call of duty because of his nature. And so he gives this speech that if given his choice, he would choose the local lawyer, because if he goes with the Aquan or if he goes with the Bediverian, he feels confident he'll be freed. But he is also admitting that he cannot win on the merits of what he did, and he did no wrong. He helped someone who is struggling, and that cannot be wrong. This is a pretty powerful argument, and the crew is swayed, and they decide to go with the local lawyer. However, in the back of Lieutenant Marcus Duvall's mind, he's starting to concoct plans for how to get Carson Rogers off this planet if things go poorly, which I found funny. But this was a very powerful episode, at least for me. And so, we end off with one final scene, the review of evidence with the local lawyer. Marcus Duvall is working with that lawyer very hard to make sure that all the evidence is in hand and that there's every possibility that they can win the case for real. And it's in those last moments, as a Betazoid, he catches a stray thought from the local lawyer and discovers this thought. Finally, I'll be able to put the Federation on trial for the glory of the Romulan Star Empire. And he realizes that the person sitting next to him is a surgically altered Romulan living here in disguise. So, how will this episode end? I have no idea, but I'm looking forward to it. So, thanks for listening to 1.5 episodes of Star Trek Adventures from the To Know the Unknown campaign. If you're interested, stick around for the next section where we look at system and my reflections upon it.
Let's talk a little bit about the ship in this campaign. The USS Crow, which we amusingly called NCC 71701.
When we launched the campaign, the ship that I wanted to use and was able, I guess, to interest the players in, the Cheyenne, was not available officially from Modiphius. And so using the templates provided and the method of creating a ship provided in the core rules, I built the Cheyenne class. Now, I don't make any assertion that this is anything like a canonical vessel, but it's a look and a bundle of statistics which support the campaign we were looking for. So if we go over things, we'll see that first off, the engines trait is too high. And it's too high in exactly the same way that you'll find the weapons trait is too high in the Defiant in the core rules. It's there for a reason. It's there to provide a certain thing to rely upon, a certain thing to be proud of, and a certain thing that may rise up and provide problems at interesting points in time. The ship itself, for us, will be scale 5, although I suspect canonically it would be smaller. For us, the Cheyenne is a test bed. It's a prototype for what would later become the Galaxy class. This particular prototype having improved warp drive, improved power systems, improved shield recharge, saucer separation, and secondary reactors. The ship is all about power, the redistribution of power, and the recovery of power. And so, to find a specific use for it, they send it out on its own into the Beta Quadrant for our campaign. Having a history of being an exploration vessel, you note that all the shuttlecraft aboard are named after famous explorers. And because they're expecting it to run into particular trouble, it's armed with quantum torpedoes. So, our USS Crow, a version of the Cheyenne, launches to support our campaign. There are a bunch of interesting mechanical things that went on during these 2 sessions that I've now recapped. This one, of course, is the amusing one, so let's talk about that. In Star Trek, using 2d20, the best roll you can get is a 1. And on these dice, that looks like the Star Trek insignia. Well, this is obviously as far away from that as you can possibly get. And this campaign has seen a lot of 1s rolled, to the point where I'm starting to wonder if the dice themselves are loaded. We've seen 20s. Never seen this. This was a roll of 2 dice, which resulted in 2 20s. Pretty shocking, surprising. There's lots of things that I can do as the game master in this situation. One of them could be to simply add to the threat pool, and that is exactly what the player wanted me to do. This was a roll involving the use of telepathy to try and figure out what had happened to our missing crewman in the shore leave episode. Now, at this point in the episode, he hadn't been arrested yet, or at least he hadn't arrived at the police station yet, which is where this particular roll took place. And being on their guard, being aware that things might be happening, the executive officer, Betazoid, telepath, wanted to make sure that he wasn't being lied to by the local police. So he extended his telepathic perceptions to read the man's mind, and this is the roll that we got. Now, what can I do? The temptation, I think for many, is to go for humor or to go for embarrassment, to make failure have impact. But this is what I'm looking at. This is someone for whom telepathy is as natural as breathing. They grow up with it. It's a part of their life. It's a part of their culture. He grew up in that culture. He then went on to become a Starfleet officer, so capable and competent that he was able to rise to second in command aboard a starship. I don't want to make him the butt of humor. I don't want to make the impact more important than the character, the campaign, or consistency. But I also have to acknowledge the fact that this role is, as I said, as far away from success as it's possible to get. So what do? Well, I looked at the intention. What was he intending to do? I didn't look at how he did it. I didn't approach it from the you drop your sword and your pants fall down point of view. I looked at it from the point of view that he's trying to find the crewman. He's doing everything he can to find his location, to determine if people are being honest with them, to maybe detect clues that might not be obvious to the person he's speaking to, but will be obvious to him. And so this is what I did. This role adds complication. This role makes it harder to find Carson Rogers and or what happened to Carson Rogers. So in the thread of events that happen, I decide that Carson Rogers had removed his comm badge to the point where he had interfered with the locals. He was about to do something else, change out of his uniform and into more appropriate vacation attire for a hot tropical planet. He takes off his comm badge, and in between transferring it to the next set of clothing, the event happens. Then, the second thing, he wants to use telepathy to very quickly just lift clues out of the minds of people so that the investigation can be bypassed. Well, this role is telling me the investigation is not going to be bypassed. And so the spectators, the people who are brought in as witnesses to the crime, none of them actually saw anything that looked like a specific crime. And this part was already true based on the nature of the setup for the episode. But what I mean is each one of them failed to recognize as locals what it was that had occurred. So they were confirming having seen him on the beach. They were confirming being in a certain place at a certain time. They were, they each had pieces of the puzzle, and so it would slow down the investigation. I knew that Marcus Duvall would continue to use telepathy, and so he was able to use his telepathy, but he would have to sift through the brains of many, many witnesses and the police collecting all that information before any kind of sense would be made to him. And so we can have this kind of catastrophic failure without having a catastrophic attack on the nature of the character. So again, at the start of this campaign, there were no official stats for Star Trek Adventures for the plasma torpedo. So this is definitely something I wanted to be a part of the looming threat present in the campaign, and so taking a look at the system and seeing its familiarity with Fantasy Flight Games, Star Wars, and whatnot, I felt fairly confident in designing my own weapon right out of the gate. So, while this is not canonical by any means, I thought I would share it as a demonstration of work in progress. So the plasma torpedo, initially I wanted to classify as an energy attack, partly for system reasons and partly because of the actual nature of the torpedo. But there are some things that the torpedo does in the original series episode, which it really doesn't make sense for energy to do, namely being like a seeking weapon. So torpedo it is. So that meant that without the access to increased damage output via momentum right out of the gate, that it would have to have a pretty high base weapon damage. And that gave me pause for a while. How did I want to represent that? Did I just want to use something like high yield and devastating? Did I want to go for vicious and this kind of stuff? In the end, I went for a higher base damage. I went for very specifically for scale. So the bigger the Romulan vessel, the bigger the plasma torpedo it's able to generate. +5. So this is very likely to do some interesting damage every time it hits. You don't want to be hit by it, which is exactly the effect you see in Balance of Terror. So I eventually came to terms with that. But what weapon qualities and damage effects should it have? Well, again, I tinkered with the idea of creating my own damage effects and my own weapon qualities to kind of be shorthand to get at the plasma torpedo. But on sober second thought, realized that I didn't need to. What does it do? It's this growing envelope of plasma, which eventually dissipates. Its containment, releases the energy into space. So I'm going to go with persistent. And I want it to be a seeking weapon. So I toyed again with weapon qualities for seeking. And I still have part of that in play in my actual campaign. But persistent can handle it to a certain degree. So the weapon gets fired, and it's going to exist for a number of turns. So let's attach that to persistent. The weapon hits and will continue to exist for a number of turns once damage is rolled. So basically what I'm doing is persistent. Instead of taking momentum or threat for the Romulan, that's how long this torpedo is going to hold together. Then when it hits, I roll damage, and that's how long it's going to stay damaging its target. Fair enough. Spread. Well, this is just one torpedo. It will only ever be one torpedo, so it's not a salvo of torpedoes, but it is massive, and so we can apply the effects of spread in exactly the same way. Boom. Calibration is where I do step in and make some changes. This has to be a slow weapon. It's a slow weapon in the episode. It has a massive effect on the power systems and the tactics of the Romulan vessel, so calibration has to be more than just a minor action in the turn of firing. And so I put a little asterisk on this slide, but the way that I do it is calibration and then with a number. This is the number of turns that minor actions are required for that particular Romulan vessel to launch this. So the smaller the vessel, the longer it takes them to generate the power necessary. The larger the vessel, the more quickly they can recharge and fire. Pretty simple. High yield, obviously it needs to have that kind of effect and devastating, with plasma and with it enveloping the ship in its massive roiling energies, devastating fits. So it won't be firing very often. When it fires, you're going to see it. In fact, the whole thing is designed to create terror and ensure that the crew is acting to deal with the plasma torpedo, which can heighten the submarine-style battle of cloak versus uncloaked vessel. Launch your devastating weapon and try and sneak away so you can launch it again, this cat and mouse sense of things. We don't want a face-to-face battle with the Romulans sitting at a particular range and just rolling dice at each other. So that's the design theory behind creating the plasma torpedo in this way. If you like it, use it. If it's overpowered, don't use it. Let's talk about it. And we've used it to entertaining effect. So as far as I'm concerned, it's done its job. Is this something I'd like to see in a source book someday? I'm not sure. At this point of our campaign, I think I'd have to play more. But we did have fun with it.
I hope you've enjoyed this recap and reflections video, and we'll see you next time.